Think about the last time you talked to one of your friends. How were you talking? Were you using those big $100 words, or were you using short ones? Were you talking in complete sentences, or were you talking in sentence fragments? Were you being serious, or were you being sarcastic? Now, think about the last time you talked to one of your professors. Were you using big or small words? Were you using complete sentences? Were you being serious, or were you being sarcastic? Hopefully, you had different answers for each of these. With your friends, you were probably being much more casual, much more laid back, maybe even goofing around. But with your professors, you were likely more serious and a lot more professional. And do you know why? Well, I'll tell you. It's called communication accommodation, and it's part of this big theory aptly called communication accommodation theory. Now, communication accommodation theory, or CAT for short, is one of the most studied theories in the communications field. It goes all the way back to the 1970s with its predecessor, speech accommodation theory. It's often attributed to Howard Giles, a researcher and professor at the University of California, Santa Barbara. Giles noticed something interesting. He saw that people changed the way they spoke to others depending on the situation that they were in, and he wondered why. So he started looking into it and developed one of the most popular theories that we study today. Communication accommodation theory is based on 4 assumptions. 1. Everyone who communicates has similarities and differences with the person with whom they are communicating. These similarities and differences come from both parties' pasts, and how similar or how dissimilar they are affects their willingness to accommodate when communicating. 2. How we perceive a person's speech and behaviors determines how we evaluate their message. This is essentially saying that all communication has context. And the way that we perceive a message is based on this context. Are we just idly chatting with someone, or are we having an in-depth discussion? 3. Language and behaviors give us information about social status and belonging. This assumption says that in a conversation, each member has a status relative to the others. If you're talking to your boss, then he or she is the one who has the power. However, if you're helping someone find direction, then you're the one with the power. And because of this assumption, subordinate individuals are more likely to accommodate to those in power. And 4. There are varying degrees to which we accommodate others, and this is usually guided by social norms. Every conversation has expectations based on social factors. For example, when you're in the grocery store, it's okay for you to make small talk to the cashier. However, if you are on a crowded train, small talk might not be so welcomed. Giles says that there are 2 ways in which we accommodate others. He calls these convergence and divergence. Convergence. Convergence is when we speak and behave more similarly to the person with whom we're communicating. There are many different elements of communication that we can converge on. Pace of speech, pitch, tone, and even nonverbal behaviors. Have you ever spoken to someone who's whispering? Chances are you're going to whisper too. And this is convergence. Divergence. Divergence is, for all intents and purposes, the exact opposite of convergence. It's when an individual purposely speaks and acts differently from the person with whom they're communicating. It's usually used when a communicator wants to point out their differences from someone else, such as in a debate or when you're just expressing a different viewpoint. There's a utility to divergence as well. It allows people and cultures in general to retain their identity, providing a richer communication experience. Now, there have been a lot of studies published about communication accommodation theory, and many researchers have added onto this foundation. But this foundation has always proven to be very sound. The fact is, there are a lot of different elements that play into how we communicate with others. But the ways in which we exploit both our similarities and differences are important. And understanding that will help you to become a better communicator. So now I'm going to give you a little experiment to do with your friends. The next time you're sitting with them, act in a way that you normally wouldn't act. If you're laughing and joking around, start talking really professionally. Or, if you're studying, start joking around and see how they react. I guarantee you they're going to be a little bit confused, but when you tell them about communication accommodation theory, it'll make more sense.